Hello, my name is Robin Rayfield, and I am the Executive Director of the Ohio Retired Teachers Association. And I thank you for taking time to look at our PowerPoint presentation of the ORTA Forensic Audit that was completed, at least preliminarily, in June of 2021. And I think I'll start off with some key milestones of the ORTA Forensic Audit. And if you'll look at slide 2, since 2013, when STRS initiated a 1-year freeze of the cost of living allowance, STRS retirees have suffered financially. Even though the COLA was restored in 2014, the promised 3% COLA was reduced to 2% until 2016. So for 14, 15, and 16. And then it was totally eliminated or reduced to zero in 2017. Since 2017, no STRS beneficiary has received a cost of living adjustment. And just by way of putting this into context, this would be similar to a school district eliminating the contractual index that it pays teachers. When you were hired as a teacher, say in 1990, you received a zero base beginning teacher salary, and you weren't stuck at that salary for the rest of your career. You received an index, and maybe you got a raise every so often. At my district, we had 18 steps, and each of those steps you could count on. And even if you didn't get a base raise, you knew looking at your salary where you would be over the course of the next 18 years. Well, as a retiree, we knew that we would be receiving a base COLA, not a compounded COLA, but a base COLA every year the rest of our lives. And many of us enjoyed a few COLAs, and then all of a sudden they're gone. So we think that was totally inappropriate, possibly illegal, and certainly not ethical. Also, some of the milestones that we would talk about is when the elimination of the COLA occurred in 2017, ORTA, the Ohio Retired Teachers Association, was adamantly opposed to that, and many of our leaders spoke out against the COLA elimination at that time. Many options were offered. I could list dozens, but for example, we suggested reducing the COLA to maybe a 1% or less. We talked about paying a COLA on the first 30,000 of income so that those at the very bottom would receive the most help. None of those fit the bill, and STRS management was strictly and narrowly focused on absolutely eliminating the COLA. In slide 3, we could also list other steps that were taken by STRS. Many times they talk about pension reform. Keep in mind, pension reform is pension reduction. It is somewhat humorous to say, well, we're revising the pension to strengthen it. Actually, they're reducing benefits to make sure that they have enough to pay exorbitant salaries and keep their Wall Street cronies in high livings. By the way, that's certainly an opinionated observation. But in addition to reducing retiree benefits, STRS also instituted several changes uh, to the active STRS members. Uh, Certainly, all active educators recognize they have to work significantly longer. My calculations are that people will no longer retire at 30 years, but instead will retire at 38 years. Um, that's a significant length of time. If you think about, I was eligible for retirement at 30 years, now I have to work 38 years. There's a significant increase percentage wise. I don't know, probably 25% or more. Um, Also, active teachers have to pay 40% more into the program. What's thoroughly confounding and aggravating is that we ask our active brethren in STRS to contribute 14%, but they only get a 10.5% benefit. I don't know why any pension program would think that that makes sense. Uh, there was never any attempt to raise the employer contributions. It was simply, we're going to force our active members to pay 40% more and to get less benefit. Maybe not as critical, but basing the final year average salary computation over 5 years instead of over 3 years. Again, it's a reduction. It wasn't designed to level things out. It was designed to ensure that people made less in their retirement. Probably important to note is other pensions have done similar things. However, STRS was far better positioned, far better funded, far better, more stable than the other pension systems that instituted the changes. Looking at slide 4, something we noticed was absent was shared sacrifice. And simply stated, STRS employees have not shared in the sacrifice. When you think of active teachers paying 40% more, working 30% longer, and retirees receiving 25 to 30% less because our benefit has been cut that much, it's very maddening that STRS employees get base pay raises every year and are receive lavish bonuses. Some of those bonuses are upwards of 125% of base pay. So again, it seems like the employees that work for us are receiving a far better deal than those of us who put the money in. Just a little side note, STRS employees are members of the Public Employee Retirement System, PERS, not the STRS. And oddly enough, PERS people still get their cost of living every year. ORTA began asking questions. I'm moving to slide 5. If you consider the reduction in benefits, increases in contribution, and in years of service, we asked, why are those employees of the system not feeling the pinch? We also asked, why are you not able to pay? The stock market is at an all-time high and you can't pay your bills. What's going on here? We're hitting our benchmarks. We're doing everything we're supposed to be doing, and yet you can't pay your bills. So we said, what is the plan? We called it a pathway to COLA. But what is the plan? And they have no plan. Their plan is we'll pay you when we feel like it. And then we asked the very difficult question, why are you folks receiving bonuses and base pay raises when none of the retirees are getting what they were promised and the actives are being burdened so heavily with additional contribution rates and service requirements? Looking at slide 6, STRS, you would think, would provide answers. I mean, we are STRS. It's all our money, not theirs. They never answer. They will nod their head yes in agreement, or look down or fidget or read text messages on their phones when we're presenting public comment, but never respond to us. Interesting to note, the only time COLA or loss of benefits is discussed is from the public participation speakers. STRS never acknowledges that they owe us money or that we've had our benefits cut. Now, I got to say that persisted for about 3.5 years. Recently, there have been some mentions of COLA. They call it inflation protection. One board member, Wade Steen, appointed by the governor, has been a strong voice for retirees and even for actives, in that he says we need to pay them. We need to tell them when we're going to pay them. We need to make a plan to start meeting our obligations. And we are thankful for his support. So moving to slide 7, we got to the point where enough is enough. Okay, ignore us. Don't respond to us. Act like we're a burden to them. What did ORTA do? Well, we started working with 2 Facebook groups. One was called the STRS Members Only Forum, and one was called the STRS Watchdogs Group. And both of these groups are comprised of many of them retirees, some active teachers, and perhaps some interested parties. And we noticed that we shared common goals. Many of our members, ORTA members, were involved in these groups. And we all had a goal of getting answers to our questions. So after being approached by members in both of these groups about the possibility of ORTA serving as a fiscal agent for raising money to hire a forensic auditor, the ORTA board agreed, and we started collecting money in October of 2020. In a little over 3 months, I'm on slide 8, in a little over 3 months, we collected the required $75,000. There were approximately 1,000 people who donated. They were ORTA members, non-ORTA members, active STRS members, ORTA local chapters. We want to always mention Hamilton County Retired Teachers Association. They contributed $15,000. But we had 30 or 40 of our chapters donate money. The Ohio Federation of Teachers, OFT, contributed $10,000. Important to note, the Ohio Education Association did not contribute and were not supportive of the forensic audit. In February of 2021, Mr. SIEDLE began his work. Looking at slide 9. Edward, he goes by the name Ted SIEDLE. He is the owner of Benchmark Financial Services, is a nationally known pension expert. He's a former SEC attorney, a best-selling author. He's a friend to pension beneficiaries and a bane to pension fraudsters. Mr. SIEDLE requested public records from STRS regarding the investments. STRS refused to provide many of the records, even though we think they're public. What kind of information was Mr. SIEDLE asking for? Moving to slide 10. The information he was asking for is how much money is invested in each of the 135 external alternative investment accounts. STRS invests some of its money in private equities and hedge funds and other what I would refer to as risky vehicles to make money. We wanted to know what is the value of those alternative investments. And maybe equally important is what are the fees, costs, maybe expenses, whatever word you want to use. How much does it cost for us to make those investments? Certainly, these seem like very routine questions that we could look up any particular investment and say, okay, in this particular hedge fund, we invested $100 million. We paid out $100,000 in fees and costs and expenses, and the thing grew by 5%, and it's now worth $1,200,000. Those are just obviously, I'm just throwing out numbers. We thought that would be good to know for each of the 135 alternative investments. And we were told we're not entitled to that money. So we had to ask, what are you hiding from us? Well, why won't you share with us? It's our money, not yours. Benchmark Financial, moving to slide 11, had to seek assistance from the Supreme Court. Now, one has been successful, and they've turned over one record or one group of records. But so far we have about 10% of what we have asked for. So STRS claims it's transparent and said, well, you have the information. Rest assured, we would not be at the Supreme Court if we had the information. Our question is, why does STRS not share with its members the amount of money in its alternative accounts or share those costs and fees? We think they don't share them because they would paint a very poor picture of STRS. Moving to the next slide. What did Mr. SIEDLE find? What did we find out in the audit? And we found out essentially 8, I'll call them findings, 8 key pieces of information. First and foremost, STR is not transparent. It claims to be, and they even win awards from other state agencies indicating that they are very transparent. But they're not. They won't give us basic information about the investment program. For example, if you're an STRS member, active or not active, did you know that STRS lost over $500 million, $525 million in Panda Power, private equity fund? We only found that out doing our own research. STRS claims, well, we told you. Trust me, they didn't. This is something we look for. Why did we only find out in 2021 when that went bankrupt? I'm going to say in 16, maybe 17. So our question is, are there similar investments to Panda? I'll throw one out. It's not on our slide. Infinity Q. You read about it if you Google or do a search of Infinity Q. You'll find out it's a hedge fund that has fallen on some very hard times, and actually there's some legal issues with it. Well, guess who's invested in it? Apparently, STRS is. How much? I don't know. Uh, and we'd like to know how much money we lost there. Did we lose any? Maybe we've got bad information. But again, we don't know. STRS knows. So why won't they share that with us? In slide 13, we also found out that STRS underreports the fees associated with its investment program. You can't get a straight answer. They often say, everything we give you is net of fees and expenses, and that's simply not true. They'll say, this is net of fees, net of expenses, and then the next slide in a presentation, they'll take out more fees or more expenses. And that's done on design. It is very confusing. It's very difficult to follow this. One of the things Mr. SIEDLE located in doing his search in public records, one of STRS's external consultants, CEM benchmarking, actually puts in their report that STRS may not know the cost and fees that they pay. Well, my goodness, if they don't know the cost and fees, that's not a good sign. The other thing is, either they know it and they're not telling us, or they don't know it. Either situation is a bad situation. Underestimating these fees and underreporting could be as much as $2 billion over the last 5 years. Slide 14, STRS pays committed capital fees. Now, there seems to be some discrepancy here. Mr. SIEDLE estimated that the committed capital fees are 143 million. STRS says they're closer to 60 million. Either way, you have to understand what a committed capital fee is. Committed capital is money that's still in my checkbook, but I've agreed that you'll invest for me. So I call you up, make a pledge of $100 million. You start charging me a fee on day one on $100 million. You may not invest that $100 million for a year or several months, but I pay a fee from day one. So the money's still sitting in my checking account. You haven't done a darn thing with it, and you're charging me a fee. STRS's response to this is, oh, that's customary. That's just the way Wall Street works. Well, once again, we find out that's not exactly true. Certainly some hedge funds, certainly some private equity groups try to do that, but people routinely do not pay committed capital fees. But STRS does, and that's important to note. Moving on to slide 15, we also noticed, Mr. SIEDLE noticed, that it often over-reports its performance. This over-reporting results in incentive payments, those are bonuses, paid to investment employees who didn't reach their benchmark. One review done by current STRS board member, Rudy Fechtenbaum, who is a retired economics professor in Ohio, did a review, and he did not see one benchmark that the investment group had reached during the last 10-year period. Board member Wade Steen pinned them down on this and determined that STRS uses actual performance as the benchmark. That was identified in the 2006 audit as a practice that must be eliminated. And yet STRS ignored that recommendation of the state's audit in 2006 and has continued to this day to pay people based upon their actual performance. In other words, you can't not get your bonus. It's paid for. Whatever your performance is, you have met your benchmark. And that's simply unacceptable. No one would accept that. Also, moving to slide 16, oftentimes STRS will remind us that they add 100 million to the bottom line at STRS every year, that their active management program, their efforts in the investment department add $100 million. Mr. SIEDLE's calculation is something vastly different. After you factor out the overestimated returns that they claim and the underreported fees that are evident, that number turns into a $400 million liability. So here's STRS telling us we add 100 million. Here's Mr. SIEDLE saying, based on what I have, I see you costing the pension system 400 million. That's a massive $500 million difference. Also on this slide, we talked about a little bit, last slide, about ignoring some of the findings of the 2006 ORSC audit. And there were 9 of them. There were 88 findings or recommendations, of which STRS addressed many, but 9 of them they refused to address. And their report to the public was, we carefully assessed each and every one of those recommendations, and we absolutely addressed every one of them. There were some we simply disagreed with, so we ignored. Can you really ignore a recommendation? That doesn't make sense to me. Why are we doing it if you get to ignore them? Slide 17, STRS response to the SIEDLE report. Naturally, we did not expect STRS to all of a sudden say, oh, wow, really? We've been doing things wrong for these decades? Wow, okay, we're going to change. That's far-fetched to think that they would even go down that path. Maybe that they would have looked at 1 or 2 of the findings and said, hey, there's something here. Now, I should tell you, we have never heard from the STRS board. We've only heard from STRS management. STRS board, even though they were asked to respond, have not responded. We have no evidence that they've read the report. The only thing we know is that management has responded. If you think of a group that's been pilfering a pension system for decades and decades, making bonuses that they haven't earned and paying their Wall Street cronies billions, there's a little too much money there for them to all of a sudden say, oh, well, we got caught, we're going to quit doing it. STRS challenge didn't provide any As mentioned, STRS did respond. They disagreed with every one of the findings. Again, we don't think they provided evidence to support their disagreement. And when I say STRS, I'm referring to STRS management responded. And as you might also guess, Mr. SIEDLE responded to the STRS response. So we have dueling experts, kind of a he said, she said situation, which leaves everybody in the dark, really. Again, the answer, provide the documentation that Mr. SIEDLE seeks, then everyone knows what the real picture is. Moving to slide 18, here we are, and we say, what's next? What happens at this point? We have, on one hand, STRS, on the other hand, ORTA and its forensic audit. And we're absolutely on opposite sides of an issue. Rest assured, ORTA will continue to fight this fight. We are convinced that this is a worthy cause and that our situation, getting people more of what they were promised, is worth fighting for. So we're using the right makes might philosophy. But you have to consider the sides in the battle. On one hand, you have ORTA with Ted SIEDLE. We've already spent our $75,000. On the other side of the battle, you have STRS. Now consider what they have at their disposal: $95 billion. They have 105 investment people whose livelihood is dependent upon showing themselves in a positive light, showing that they overachieve, minimizing the fees that they pay, and overinflating the returns they claim. They have 25 senior staff, also dependent upon keeping information away from the true investors, the STRS members. They have 4 giant consultant companies, again, dependent upon the hundreds of thousands of dollars STRS pays them and the money they get from Wall Street. ACA, CEM, Cliffwater, and Callan, all are huge corporations. They have essentially unlimited capital. So STRS has the best witnesses money can buy. There's no question about it. The more we pay, the better they write things about STRS. So with so much money at stake, it's not surprising that people who have had things their way for decades and not been held to account would not appreciate being called to account. This is not to mention the billions that Wall Street gets out of our pension. So it's a very uphill battle, to say the least. STRS and all of its actors want nothing more than to keep the status quo. Moving to slide 19, what has ORTA done? Well, we've shared this with anybody who's willing to sit down and read it. Our SIEDLE report has been sent to all elected representatives and senators. It's been shared with the Attorney General, the Auditor of State, the Governor. It's been shared with the Ohio Retirement Study Council, who's the group of elected people charged with oversight of the pension systems. Remember, these are the same group that missed the 10-year deadline. They had 10 years to prepare for it, but they couldn't get their act together and hit a 10-year deadline. And now they're halfway through the next 10-year deadline, and they have almost started the audit process. What's important to note is they hired a company who is closely connected, as close as can be connected to one of the external consultants at STRS. Yeah, talk about the fox watching the hen house. That audit will go nowhere. So one would ask, hey, why isn't the media all over this? Well, I can tell you, several national stories have been written. You can Google STRS Ohio, MSNBC, Forbes, Bloomberg. Other large corporations have written stories on this because it is Wall Street news. But you got to ask yourself, why isn't the Dispatch or the Inquirer or the Akron Canton paper or the Cleveland paper, why aren't they on this? Well, you need to also understand those papers are owned by hedge funds. Apollo Group owns Gannett Publishing. Gannett Publishing owns 20 of the largest newspapers in Ohio. You'll have to think real hard to figure out who is very heavily invested in Apollo. And when you come to the conclusion and recognize that STRS is in deep with Apollo, why would Apollo have one of its companies write bad stories about its largest investor? So we really have our work cut out for us with the Ohio media. Pay to play is really involved in Ohio media and politics. Moving to slide 20, there is a solution to this. STRS could give the information. We asked for the prospectus. We asked for the investment information. They could provide that. We could look and know if there's any more Panda Power style investments. Why won't they provide those records? What are they hiding? Certainly, I would not call that transparent. And finally, I would say that it's important to note that we do have 3 trustees who I believe are committed to being advocates for STRS, being true fiduciaries. Wade Steen, appointed by the governor, Rudy Fichtenbaum, elected by STRS retirees, and Yoel Mayerfield, appointed by the treasurer of the state of Ohio. I do believe they're advocates. They ask tough questions. They hold the staff accountable. Unfortunately, the other 8 members of the Board of Trustees don't ask those same tough questions. They uniformly, lockstep, do whatever STRS management tells them to do. They often, if they do speak at all, they only speak glowingly of what great people we have working for us. And they're deserving of every penny. One of the members, Mr. Rhodes, actually said nobody gets a bonus, even though everyone gets a bonus that's in the investment staff. He said none of those are bonuses. Those are just monies that they've earned. And he's teaching our people. That's kind of scary. What we would do is ask that you all support ORTA's challenge to the status quo at STRS. We ask that you get involved. We ask that you join us in our fight. If you're a retiree, join ORTA. If you're already an ORTA member, well, thank you. If you're an active member, we offer an opportunity to join ORTA for only $10 a year. We'll include you on our email list. We'll mail you our yearly mailing. We would also say that unions do a good job settling contracts, fighting grievances. As a superintendent, I know this. And oftentimes they're worth their money. They're not so good at fighting for your pension benefits. And we would ask that you consider those pension benefits and that having ORTA protect them for you for $10 a year is a bargain. So I thank you again for taking the time to listen to our presentation and to go through this. I realize it's lengthy, and I apologize for that, but there is a lot of information to put out here. Again, thank you, and we hope that you've enjoyed the information we presented. Feel free to call us at ORTA or to reach out and email us. Thanks again. Bye-bye.